If you're watching this, you're probably going through something really painful right now, whether you're grieving the loss of somebody who passed or somebody who exited your life in some way. And I just want to start this video by saying that you're not alone. I think a lot of people have this misconception that grief is something that you go through when somebody is no longer in this world, but it can even be harder when you're grieving somebody who is still in this world, but they're just no longer part of your life, whether that was your decision or theirs, and you go through a lot of grief then too. Whether it's the end of a romantic relationship, a friendship that fell apart, or just growing apart from people, that happens to everybody, and loss is loss. And when somebody is no longer part of your world, it can feel like a huge part of you is missing. And a lot of people are walking around this world with this hole that they're trying to fill by meeting new people and trying to replace whatever they had with the other person with somebody new or something new. And for a lot of people, their first instinct is to go for short-term satisfaction. And so a lot of people jump from one relationship to another relationship, from one friendship to another friendship to try to fill that void. And there's absolutely no judgment there. I think this is a very natural human urge, but it's not the best way to go about grief. Because what happens is when you fill the void with somebody else, that grief is still there. That inner child is still in there crying for attention and crying to be healed and crying to go through that grief. And when you replace that void with something else or somebody else, you're not allowing yourself to grieve a loss so that you can be your most healed self for whatever is to come in the future. Now, I know that choosing the hard way to grieve is no easy task for anybody. But if you're anything like me, I don't want to be a hurt adult going around hurting other people just because I didn't take the time to heal things that happened to me in the past. And so I'll always choose to be alone until I feel ready to give love and operate with nothing but love. And I've gone through my fair share of loss, trust me, whether that's people close to me passing away, heartbreak, friendships ending, although I was pretty lucky with my friendships, and I have amazing people who are still in my life even today. But if there's anything that I know about grief, is that it's the hardest thing anybody's ever going to go through in life. And the hardest thing for me about grief is that it comes to you in waves. One second you're grieving and sad, the other second you're angry, and then you're confused, and then you're back to being angry. Sometimes you're just numb and you're okay going through the day. And that's what's so hard about it, because you don't know how to handle any of these emotions that can happen within the same day or within the same hour. And again, that's why I don't judge anybody who chooses momentary satisfaction over trying to heal all of these emotions and feel all of these emotions, because it will have you on the floor crying for days. So I just wanted this video to kind of talk about grief and how to cope with all of these emotions and what's waiting for you on the other side once you go through it properly. And not just in a just get over it way, but in a get through it way. Get through the emotions and get through the feelings. And I know it might not feel like it right now, especially if you're in the early stages of grief, but it will get so much better and you will get through this. In the beginning of grief and heartbreak, the first emotions I would always feel is shock and disbelief. And I'd always refuse to believe that whatever is happening is actually happening to me. And then obviously you realize that you're actually suffering a loss. And this also applies if you chose to exit somebody's life. Just because you chose to exit that person's life doesn't mean that you're not going to go through grief. If anything, it's harder to go through grief when you're the person that made the decision. And then I always experience extreme sadness and crippling loneliness to the point where I feel like I'm the only person in the world that is going through this. I think a lot of people go through this feeling. And it's so interesting because grief is such a universal experience everybody in this world experiences grief at some point. Children even experience grief. So if anything, I want you to know that you're not alone in this, and everything that you're feeling, somebody else is feeling. I felt too. But then an interesting emotion that I had always felt is always anger and frustration. The anger and frustration for me is always the hardest emotion to deal with, because that's what makes you want to go back. If there's an option to go back, obviously, if the person passed away, that's not an option. But a lot of times you want to talk about that anger. You want to express your anger to that person who's exited your life, but really you can't. And then you're also at the same time angry at yourself, because a lot of times I'd blame myself for things that happened, or things that I could have done better, or X, Y, and Z. And all of that also comes with guilt and regret at times. I'm somebody who doesn't have many regrets in life. I don't have any regrets at all, because I always believe that I made the best decision with the knowledge that I had at the time. But that doesn't mean that I don't feel guilt. And I think that's just your brain trying to look for as much control as it can get. And guilt is a way for it to gain control and put the blame on something or somebody to kind of find an answer. And a lot of times there is no answer. A lot of times whoever has exited your life is not a bad person, and you're not a bad person. You guys were just not meant to be together anymore in that sense. Again, whether that's a friendship or a romantic relationship. After you've gone through these emotions a few times, no matter how long that's going to take, and again, it's going to take for you however it needs to take. There is no time to grieve. It could be days, it could be weeks, it could be months, it could be years, and there's nothing wrong with you for that. But at some point, you always get exhausted from feeling this way. I know I did a few times. You get exhausted of feeling sad, of feeling angry, of wondering what could have been, of wondering what you could have done better. And then you just start feeling numb, honestly. And this is not a linear process by any means. It doesn't mean that, you start by feeling sad or shocked and then you end up feeling numb at the end after a few months. But if there's one thing I learned, is that there is no one way to grieve at all. Now, I wish somebody would have told me how I could cope better with this grief. And I'm just going to talk about a few things that helped me get better. I think the first thing to remember is that the whole get over it thing is extremely, extremely harmful. I used to think this way, right? As an overachiever and as somebody who has to keep doing things, obviously you have a whole life that you have to keep maintaining. And just because you're going through grief doesn't mean that your entire life has to stop. You still have a job, you still have friends to attend to, maybe even kids to attend to, and you can't just lay on the floor and go through all of these emotions, right? And the whole get over it thing is extremely toxic, because it will take you to the other end of the spectrum where you're not feeling any of the emotions. And I think it's really, really important for you to give yourself space to feel everything. Yes, it's hard. Yes, you don't want to feel sad and angry and lonely and numb and all of these things. But if you don't, it will stay inside, and then it will come out later when you don't want it to, years later. I don't know about you, but for me personally, I would rather go through it now by myself as much as I can. Do the best that I can in my daily activities, in my job, with my friends, and try to feel the feelings whenever they come. And the whole get over it thing wasn't even something that people would tell me. I would just tell myself, and I would be angry at myself for feeling certain emotions and tell myself, you just have to keep going. You have priorities, you have a job, you have things to do. That would be so extremely counterproductive. And if there's anything that I learned last year, is that I just have to feel things. If that means taking 5 minutes after a work meeting to just check in with myself, how am I feeling? Am I hot? Am I cold? Am I feeling lonely? If I need to cry, I'll cry. Just feeling the emotions will take you a really, really, really long way. Pain doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It will find other ways to come out later on, whether that's through addictions, whether that's through anger, whether that's through anything really, but it will come out eventually. So I'd rather feel it right now as I'm going through this and acknowledge it and then heal from it properly. And you're not weak for feeling things deeply. If there's anything that I appreciate in people is feeling things deeply. So try journaling, talking to a friend, crying out loud. Another thing I want you to think about is to find little things to take care of yourself on a daily basis. Obviously, when you're going through something like this, something as painful as this, you don't want to do anything. You want to stay in bed, and you want to stay in bed all the time. And I want you to start small. And I know a lot of people say this, and if there's anything you don't want to be doing right now is be outside or see people. But if you can, just for 5 minutes, go to the balcony and smell some fresh air. If you don't have a balcony, step outside, go for a 5-minute walk. Start small, and those little steps matter. Find little ways to take care of yourself. Cook yourself a meal rather than eating out or not eating anything at all. Self-care can also be calling a friend and FaceTiming them for 5-10 minutes. The third thing I want you to think about, and I've touched up on this a little bit throughout the video, but please avoid self-destructive actions. So it is so tempting to numb the pain as much as possible and answer to temptations from new people, addictions, just to feel numb for a little bit. I know how tempting that is. But healing can only happen if you actually face it, and if you face it alone. Whenever you feel that urge to do that or to do anything that is considered self-destructive, I want you to talk to somebody. Talk to somebody that you trust, and let people around you know that you're going through this and everything that you're feeling and what they can expect of you. And I'm sure there's going to be somebody who's ready to lend you an ear whenever you need. I know I was so grateful, and I'm still so grateful for the people in my life that were there for me during that time. People who I can call and just cry on the phone with and talk about the same things over and over again until I got over it. I'm so grateful for those people. Please trust your friends to help guide you through this. Even if you don't want to talk about what's going on, just being around people in silence can help. I know I've done that a few times as well. And honestly, me being me, I had a really hard time leaning on people for a really long time. And I would think that I would be a burden to anybody if I'm calling and crying on the phone. And something I've learned last year specifically is, how would I feel if I was in their shoes and I wouldn't be able to help them while they're going through grief? I would feel horrible. And me not allowing my friends or my closest friends or family to be there for me in those times would make them feel helpless. And so something I learned is to be a lot more vulnerable with people. That wasn't something I was comfortable with for a really long time. I'm the oldest child, and I'm extremely independent of that. And so I had a hard time letting people in that way. Obviously, I had close friendships for a long time, but a lot of my friends had never seen me cry. A lot of people had never seen me cry or be vulnerable. But one thing I learned in the past few months specifically is that that is okay, and those people will love you just as much, if not more, if you let them in and let them help you and guide you through this. Because I wouldn't want to feel helpless if they're going through grief or if they're going through a hard time. Once you've done all of the things that I've talked about, I want you to know that you will start moving forward. That pain will not last forever, even if it feels like that right now, even if you feel stuck right now. One day you will wake up and you will just feel lighter. Heartbreak and grief change you, but they don't have to define you. While I was going through grief, I had a really hard time with hopelessness. Specifically, I'm somebody who'd be considered a pretty positive person. I see the world with rose heart lights most of the time, But while I was going through grief, I had a really hard time believing in better days, believing in the best in people. And that was really scary to me. That was the scariest thing to me, actually, because I want to believe in the best in people. I want to believe that people are good. I want to believe that better people will walk into my life, and eventually they do. But at the time that you're grieving, that hopelessness haunts you. And I want you to know that eventually you will feel hopeful again. Eventually you will feel love again, and you will meet people who align with you better. And if you're a creative person, think about channeling that grief into trying something new, like art, learning a new skill, a job. That was really, really helpful for me personally. I got to do everything that I wasn't able to do before, and use the time and the void to do things to better myself. And that created so many nice opportunities for me. And my life started upgrading more and more and more. Just that is going to give you a lot of hope for the future. You will love again. You will be happy again. You will be aligned with people who are good for you, and life will surprise you in so many ways. I'm on the other side of grief right now, and looking back, I'm so grateful for everything that happened. I hope that during this process, you can be kind to yourself and gentle with yourself and patient with yourself, no matter how long that's taking. Healing is a process, and you're doing way better than you think. If you have any stories or advice that helped you during grief, feel free to leave it in the comments. I would love to know your stories, and somebody might need it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.